Hi. Welcome. Thank you for coming on such a beautiful, sunny, first nice, pretty sunny day we had in a while. And happy St. Patrick's Day. And also I want to thank Colin Stair for being so generous to once again let us use this wonderful space for a lecture. And I'm going to introduce Paul Cassidy, who is the chair of the board of the Shaker Museum at Mount Lebanon. And I'm going to guess that he's Irish. So and he's going to introduce our speaker to you today. And thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And this is part one of 2 lectures we're doing with the Shaker Museum Mount Lebanon and the Columbia County Historical Society. The next one will be held in Kinderhook on May 5th. And there are cards downstairs. If you didn't get one, you can take with you to remind you of the next event. And it will be slightly different, and Paul can tell you a little bit more about that.
Thank you all for coming today. Before I introduce our speaker, Rob Emlen, 2 points. The Shaker Museum 2 years ago was awarded a $750,000 grant from the Henry Luce Foundation to digitize our collection and bring it online. The new website will be launching at the end of April. And next Saturday here in Hudson at the Jeff Bailey Gallery between 1st and 2nd Street on Warren we are opening the exhibition of the Ellsworth Kelly and Jack Shear Shaker collection, which will be on view for till the beginning of May. And now to introduce our speaker, Rob Emlen. Rob Emlen recently retired as University Curator and Senior Lecturer in American Studies at Brown University. He's at work on a book about how the Shakers were pictured in popular illustrated press of the 19th century America. A complement to his book, Shaker Village Views, about how Shaker artists pictured their own communities in the 19th century. Rob has served on our collections committee, we think, for about a decade here today. And Rob Emlen, please join us. Thank you. We're going to take the lights. I can go a little further. So I'm just watching along. Great.
Well, thanks very much. Nice to see everybody here. Laurie said on such a nice sunny day, what's everybody doing indoors? So I'll show you pictures of a nice sunny day at the Mount Lebanon Shaker Village. Some miles distant from here. Some people here are quite familiar with the Shakers, and some people are learning about the Shakers. So I don't want to invent the wheel for you, but if I skip ahead and somebody said, well, wait a minute, what were you talking about? Just sing out, and I will back up and explain some of the inside baseball. Everybody hear me okay? Yes, okay. Well, so I thought I might talk about a group of illustrations made in 1856 by a New York, and by that I mean Poughkeepsie illustrator who spent his professional life working in town, working in the city. He was an amateur historian, a citizen historian, you might say, wrote popular books about the history of the Americas, and then he sat down and illustrated. And he was also a wood engraver, so he was able to make pictures of the things that he was describing that he illustrated in his books. And he was employed for much of his professional life at Harper's magazine, which was this new, the forefront of a new phenomenon in American life. These prints that had formerly been rare and expensive by the mid-19th century, by say the 1830s and 40s, became quite popular and inexpensive, and so you could buy them in cheap magazines. I mean, you could buy cheap magazines with illustrations, and America was just becoming aware of the illustrated world. So his account of a visit to the Mount Lebanon Shaker village, right here on the Pickfield, Lebanon line, was the first of a number of articles that were published throughout the rest of the 19th century, but he was among the first who got in to see the Shakers, who were, tended to be circumspect and reserved. They had an unconventional life, and they didn't want to be exposed other than for the purpose of proselytizing. So he was able to work with them to help them understand and how this might not only satisfy the curiosity of people out in the big world who knew about the Shakers, but also help them bring their word out to the public. So his visit there in August of 1856, he wrote up over the next year and illustrated and was published here in 1857, 11 months after his visit. His description of showing up there is just the most lyrical, pleasant, just pictures the most pleasant scene. It was a Saturday evening, the weekly toil and the community had ceased, and the Sabbath stillness brooded over the populous town. Immense dwellings filled with men and women and extensive workshops supplied with the choicest implements lined the one broad street. Order and neatness there held high court with a majesty I had never before seen. The very dust in the road seemed pure. The virtue next to godliness was apparent upon every stone. So this is the text that this very talented writer, very thoughtful and sensitive person was using to describe his introduction to the Shaker village at Mount Lebanon. So then he talks about how there's a large brick building and it's painted chocolate, and the office and store. Those of you who have been to a Shaker village know that this is the place where strangers, where outsiders like us, are welcome into the village. People don't tend to get in and wander around the Shaker village. It's Shakers tend to remove themselves from the large world, from people like us. But when you need to do business or visit or stay over, you get to stay in the office and stores. So that's what he's describing. So here are the pages from Harper's Illustrated. And so his text is here interspersed with a picture here of the great barrel-roofed meeting house, the bow-roofed meeting house at Mount Lebanon, and the worshipers in the meeting house here at inside this room on Sabbath. And so it's the meeting house was built in 1822 and 23. So here we are 3 years later, showing it with stoves in the corner and then long stovepipes that run the length of the building to exhaust the wood smoke, but also to warm the building on their way through. And these ubiquitous pegboards, these are these little dots or pegs going all around the room. And it's a pretty good architectural study for someone who's just sketched this thing. We think that he used a camera obscura, a lens that you, perhaps some of you know this, you look inside a little hooded dark enclosure and the lens will throw an image onto a flat surface. So there you are sketching, tracing on the flat surface on your little pad of paper what the camera lens or the ground lens will project. So here is one of his sketches. It's a little funny for us. He never meant us to see this, of course. So we're looking at one view here in this aspect, and then he's flipped his page over in the notebook, and the other one is upside down over here. So he's looking at this wall now with these great tall windows and little notes about, you can see here it says, interior view. From the women's side, the walls are robin's egg blue. He goes through describing for himself, because he's going to be back later making this engraving. You can see where it says here, Benson Lossing. He was in business with his brother-in-law, and so he's the Benson part. And so just as he makes this engraving, he's just trying to refresh his memory about what is what in the room. But after he made this drawing on site, pegs, wainscoting, little notes, little pictures of a clock on the wall here, when he got back to the office in Manhattan, then he made watercolor drawings. So these were never displayed. There was nobody who had any particular interest in pictures of color pictures of the Shaker village. They couldn't be reproduced in color in 1856. So they just went into a drawer. After his death in the early 20th century, the family cleaned out endless rooms full of these things, of every drawing he made over a long 40-year period and every note he made for publication. And so they went to auction, and they were ultimately purchased by a dealer who sold them to the Huntington Library out in Pasadena, where they just sat. And they were not published until the 1970s and 80s. So these things are they're not unknown, but they were never exposed in the 19th century and throughout most of the 20th century. So it's a great privilege for us now to be able to have a look at them, because when he says, well, these things are robin's egg blue, that means different things to different people. But here we know exactly what color he meant by that. And when he says, here's the wainscot, in other words, the paneled rail at the bottom, to keep you from banging your chair into the plaster, there's the little benches. And so he's articulated these things in the watercolors in ways that assist him later when he's back in the shop engraving these things into pictures, into printable pictures. Here is his guide. A couple of guys were showing him through the village. He just couldn't wander through unescorted. So here's one Shaker brother standing in the doorway, and there's another Shaker who's sitting here. There's this old-fashioned long frock tumbling down behind him, but he's sitting with his legs out in front of him. And all of this is captured in this watercolor drawing. And these things have survived for us now in great shape. They haven't been exposed to the light, the watercolors that is, and haven't faded with sunlight. So when we want to know what the colors were of the Shaker village at its height in the 1850s, these are the documents that we turn to. Here is a drawing of the Mount Lebanon Shaker village, a plan of it by an unknown person. This is at the Shaker Museum at Mount Lebanon, in their library. The road we take now is called the State Road to Pittsfield, is Route 20. If you know where we are, here's to Lebanon Springs, downtown Lebanon Springs, and so here's the road into the Shaker village, divided into what the Shakers called families, different residential and social groups. So the second family is here, and the second order of the church family, and because the church is here, this is the church family, and here up in the north is the north family. So he stayed, when we talked about being welcome to the office, he stayed right here in the office building, and stood there and looked out and looked up this road to the buildings of the North family, which are now the buildings of the Shaker Museum at Mount Lebanon. So here he's standing, and here he's looking, and here he is looking up at this view. Here's a postcard from the early 20th century showing a muddy dirt road and showing the most extraordinary sidewalk. These are all slabs of stone. I mean, these things are, 3 and 4 feet that somebody has quarried and dressed into slabs and brought down to the village and laid to be smooth along here. If you were, in Manhattan, this would not be a rarity. It would be a pleasure, but it wouldn't be a a rarity. But if you know what is going on in the middle of some rural village in Columbia County, that somebody would have taken the care to do this. And you know, that's the whole story with the Shakers, endless volunteer labor. So people consecrate their work of their hands toward the community's cause. And so you end up with little grace notes like this all over the village, a wonderful stone sidewalk to keep you out of the mud. Well,
Is that still there?
it is not still there. I don't know where the stones are. The buildings are still there, many of them. But these stones, for all I know, they're under the grass now, but I have never seen them. So in Lossing's final print for Harper's new monthly magazine, he has moved these things front and center. They're really the star of the show. Just because this is such an undertaking, it's such a labor of love, and so typically Shaker to invest an enormous amount of time and energy just to making life better. Well, so here is the drawing that he used, the watercolor drawing, to have when he was preparing that engraving. And so it records for us, for instance, the colors of the buildings. It records for us the fact that here's a building under construction. You see it's got no sheathing, it's got no roofing on it. Here's building materials leaning up against the side. These are just little things that his reporter's eye is catching, things that they are catching. And for no other reason than to inform him when he makes that watercolor, when he makes the wood engraving that will print in Harper's. So here is his building where he's staying. It's the public building. People would come and buy Shaker chairs, or they would come and sell things like window glass that the Shakers weren't going to make themselves. It's the place where the outsiders, those of us who were not Shakers, would come and do business with the Shakers. And if you were staying over, you could stay in a room here in the office. So here in another early 20th century postcard is the building where he stayed, and is typical of Shaker buildings that are used by both genders. There's a doorway for the brothers and there's a doorway for the sisters, so that someone doesn't have to wait for the other one to go through. They're separate but equal, you might say. The office and store, Shaker Village, Lebanon, August 18th, 1856. How's that for documentation? You know, so often we just see pictures and they say, well, it was done a long time ago, it's an old-fashioned thing, or all Shaker buildings look like this, no matter where they were. This is just so precise and so useful to those of us who study the Shakers, because it tells you when it was made, and where it was made, and what it shows. And here is a little a vignette of a horse and wagon to tell us that this is where visitors come, or this is where somebody who's going in to buy some Shaker produce has left his cart out front. There's no real reason for there to be a horse and cart out front, maybe to add to the scale so you have a sense of how big the building is. But it also is a little reminder that that's what happens here. Well, across the street from the office, here's the office, okay? And across the street from the office is this remarkable church. And by remarkable, I mean, Shakers, as we know, in their worship, need to have wide open spaces. This would be a great room for a Shaker meeting if it were not for the columns, because you would need to spin around and dance and march and express your faith through dance. And so it'd be people, we'd all be banging into columns the whole time. So the thing about a Shaker church is that somebody's got to design a truss that will carry across 63 feet and carry all of the supporting structure up above on the roof so that this entire place down below is wide open for the dance. And so the Shaker's using covered bridge technology, adapted it and figured out how to have something 100 feet long by 63 feet wide without it interrupting post or partition in the middle of it. So it was celebrated, and people came from far and wide to see it. So here we are at the office looking back to the church. Those here are the visitors. This is all of us who have come in our carriages and are here at Sunday meeting coming in to see the Shakers. I said earlier that they tended to be secluded, but they also needed to open their meetings for exposure so converts could be attracted to the community. So you didn't get to wander around and see the shops and the buildings and the dormitories, but you got to come to meeting. That's what's happening here, with a door, right, for the brothers and a door for the sisters. Lossing's engraving of this building shows not only, again, the scale of human beings up against the facade of the building, but shows the meeting house that was first built in 1787. And it's the same idea. It's a gambrel roof. You see how there's a little hiccup in the roof line here on both sides? That supports a pair of queen post trusses that are carrying the ceiling from this, so everything is lifted from the top here, and so you can have a large expanded space down below. But this building was only 40 feet long, not enough to carry the growing, to accommodate the growing number of Shakers. So when this building replaced it in 1823 and 22 and 23, this one was, you might say, deconsecrated. That's a funny word because everything in the Shaker village, the barns, the mills are all consecrated to the work of the community. But it was no longer used as the meeting house and was put up to another use. The Shakers always said that which has the greatest use is the greatest beauty. So no need to waste this building just because the church is empty. Just put it to use. In later years, somebody decided to add a story to it, another third story, a third full story. So this roof was removed. And so today, it looks like this. It's the same building, with the down below here with the gambrel roof now gone. So here we are, Shaker Meeting House, Lebanon, August 18th, 1856. I don't know if he made every single one of these watercolors on August 18th, but that's the day he was there. He recorded that he went around, he showed up on a Saturday night, as we know, and he went to service on Sunday, the 17th of August, and then by Monday the 18th, he was hard at work making all these watercolors. So that's the date he went to visit these things. There's a difference now in color that we see that we didn't see before. You notice how the old church is no longer painted white. The Shakers had strong feelings about the way things should be pictured, or colored rather, and about the way the building should be colored, and they codified these ideas into a list of rules and orders of how things should work in the village. When it's a handful of folks, everybody knows how it's supposed to work. When there are 800 people living in this community at Mount Lebanon, you have to figure out how to sort these things out and make them more formalized. So they wrote in the Millennial Laws of 1845, no buildings may be painted white save for meeting houses. And this was not just at Mount Lebanon. This was for all the 18 Shaker communities across the Northeast and down to Kentucky and Ohio. So only the meeting house should be painted white. Well, it makes sense. We want the meeting house to be the most prominent building in the community. It's had a symbolism for growth and purity, and white paint was expensive. So just let's not waste white paint on secondary buildings. So when this becomes not a church, it gets painted yellow. How great is that? To be able to see the evidence of this in Lossing's watercolor. Inside, he pictured the Shakers and the dance. This is a circle dance. The folks are going in this direction here, but can you see them behind there? They're going around, turning a corner, and coming back out. So his job is to figure out how do you give a sense of depth to how many deep are we here? 6, 8 deep, with everybody going around behind. So on the printed page, how do you give it that sense of perspective? And so let's just have a look at his watercolor drawing, made just as a guide to be able to convey in a woodcut illustration, a black and white woodcut. The Harper's was printed with black ink, and so these figures were painted with black ink. That's all you get in 1856 when you're printing a magazine. Just one color. So do you see, for instance, the trousers on the brethren here? And what happens in the next row? And the next, they get lighter as they go back. He is just keeping these visual cues in his mind about how to construct a sense of depth here. And a great bit of color documentation about what the brothers and sisters are wearing. Some of these costumes survive. By costumes, I mean, of course, not like a Halloween costume, but dress, uniform dress. So if we're lucky, these things have been kept over the years in a trunk. So the ones that have come down to us, we can tell what the color of the ribbons on the caps are, what the color of the vest and trousers are, color of the sisters' blue shoes are. But these things are notoriously fragile. The artifacts themselves, the colors are fugitive. They tend to flee and in daylight. All those ultraviolet rays bleaching away coming through the window will cause the colors to fade. So here's another bit of color confirmation about what the brothers look like. Never mind the fact that we can see the dance. They're out here holding their hands out to catch the blessings of heaven. But that's not the only thing we have here. We have a record of the color of Mount Lebanon in 1856.
Do any shoes? I noticed those shoes have high heels.
Yeah.
Is there documentation? Are there shoes in existence that show that?
Yes. These shoes are very special. They weren't only on the Sabbath, only the meeting, and apparently they put them away in dark rooms. And so Hancock Shaker Village, for instance, owns some of these sisters' shoes for meeting, the special blue ones. Blue was used especially for Shaker meetings. You didn't see that color in the rest of the village the rest of the time. So I know that Hancock does, and I wouldn't be surprised in the least if there's shoes like this also at Mount Lebanon Shaker Museum. Paul was saying earlier that there's a terrific project underway to document, photograph everything in the collection and put it online. And so that's underway, but soon we can just answer your question by dialing it up and having a look for shoes. So do you see a little spot of light here between the new meeting house and the old meeting house? That's a mill pond. That's the Tannery. It's not quite out on the street. The idea was to put all the really best buildings on the street so people came down the road, and it's a public road. And so people who come down the road go, whoa, nice place here. You really get to see the best buildings out front on display. And then by the time you get down to the mills, they're tucked in behind a little bit. And so here is the tannery. And the pond, this is not a naturally occurring pond. The Shakers were great at altering the landscape and making reservoirs of water that would be used for, here's a little gate for a flume that would go down and turn the mill wheels. So here is the Lossing Barrett wood engraving called the Tannery. And here is here's the drawing, because in that photograph we know it's a drab-looking building in color, but we don't know what color it is. And so here's the watercolor. It's a modest little watercolor. This is not one of his triumphs of watercolor artistry, but it's a great document to tell us what it was. The meeting house should be painted white without and a bluish shade within. Houses and shops should be as near uniform in color as consistent, but it is advisable to have shops of a little darker shade than dwelling houses. Barns and back buildings, such as wood houses, should be of a darker hue, either red or brown, or lead color, or something of the kind, unless they front the road or command a sightly aspect. And then they should not be of a very light color. So the only ones that are on the road are the lightest, and the meeting house is white. And when you get back, it's just to help these things recede from our view, said the Shakers. And so here we now know that this is painted a kind of earthy red, a less expensive color and appropriate for this building. Well, okay, so here's the tannery, and here is the old church with the gambrel roof. And we have a little close-up of this ancient church, the first Shaker church in Lebanon, erected in 1787, August 18th, 1856, with double doors that are probably not needed now because it's being used as an industrial building, and probably either by the guys or by the women, and not likely to be needing these doors, but they couldn't think of a great reason to close one of them up. So here they are with that nice yellow color that's been painted since 1823, when the Shakers started to use the new church. The wood engraving of this tells us about the new use. The seed house, ancient church. Seed house. That's not something that we necessarily need to have today. We don't think about having a seed house. And this is about the Shakers' industry. You know how over the years, as they were making their own goods, their own farm produce, they just had the accumulation of knowledge over the generations of hundreds of volunteer laborers. Their market research gave them better product than their neighbors. Same seeds, same soil, same climate, but over the years, the Shakers really developed this because they had developed it on a scale that just ordinary folks in town couldn't match. And so people began to come to the Shakers. Shakers Bassino beet seeds, plow deep and fine, soak the seed 18 hours in warm water. And then this is a little envelope from the North family at New Lebanon, New York. Envelope with garden seeds. They would use what they needed and sell the rest. And when I say sell the rest, this is what we mean. There's a box with how many seeds are listed here. I mean, every one of these is a different kind of seed. So there's, I don't know, 75, 80 different kinds of seeds here. Those little packets would sit in this tray, and they drop these off at all the little stores, anywhere from here around the Northeast, anywhere where the climate would accommodate that kind of seed. and come back in 6 weeks and collect the money and bring more seeds. And it wasn't until Burpee Seed Company got the idea that there was money to be made here that anybody had anything like this. And the Burpee Seed Company put the Shakers out of business with seeds. But for decades, this is how the Shakers earned income. So across the street, okay, so here's the mill pond, here's the tannery, and then across the street is the herb house. And everything I've just said about seeds is true also about herbs. Big building. This thing's 100 feet long. We're seeing it from the uphill now. The road is down here, and so this is not how Benson Lossing saw this building. He was looking uphill to see it. As the road falls away, it gets there's a lower story that emerges down below. Here, connected to, I don't know what this building is, but there's lots of agricultural industry here in 57. I'm sorry, he was here in 56. The article was not published until 57. So the herb house, in which herbs are processed, gathered, dried, crushed, made into potions and so forth. We can see how there's a difference here between the story below ground and the stories above ground. But when we turn to the watercolor, same old story, guys. Here's the stone foundation. Oh, now we see the stone foundation gives it the solid base on which to build this large building, and also protects it against water migrating up into the wooden timbers and rotting the timbers. So that's the reason in his watercolor he has picked this out. Here's the stone, here's the wood painted yellow. He loved this. He just, after he got through looking at the Shakers' religious life and the church and so forth, then he just really spent quite a lot of while enjoying the looks of this building. Here's a drawing that it did not make the cut, you might say. It didn't make it into a wood engraving. So it exists only in this watercolor. And hand press. These are iron screws being used to push blocks of wood. And we know these are different from the bricks of herbs. And here are herbs that have been gathered from the hundreds of acres of Shaker farms. And so squashed down and pressed into shape. Those folks who have been to the Shaker village at Sabbath Bay Lake in Maine, the surviving Shaker village, know that they earn some income still by producing herbs. And so here's dill from the Society of Shakers. Here's an herbal bouquet. If you go to their website, you will see you can buy all sorts of culinary herbs that they grow there. But that's not what was happening here. Here's the extract of wolfbane. DM was one of the trustees, person who did the buying and selling for the village, David Meacham. In the United Society is the United Society of Shakers in New Lebanon. So he's got a jar of wolfbane. I don't know what wolfbane is used for. So maybe any herbalists here you would know. The idea is that wolfbane is the bane of wolves. If you put it on your skin, you're supposed to be able to drive away wolves. And I don't know if it has another use. Surely if they had a label printed up and they were bottling it and selling it, it probably was good for something, but it probably was not that great for eating. It probably had a medicinal use. Here is the syrup of bitter bugle for cough, spitting of blood, and consumption, prepared by Barnabas Hinckley, MD, in the United Society of Shakers in New Lebanon. Barnabas Hinckley was an unusual figure. He was trained as a physician, which is to say he'd been over and studied medicine at the Pittsburgh College of Medicine, In the 1850s, we had a different understanding of what a physician did than we do today. But he graduated with an MD from the Pittsburgh College of Medicine and was sitting there figuring out about the medicinal properties of herbs and what they could do to improve your life. These folks were just cutting edge of herbal medicine in the United States for cough and spitting of blood, bitter bugle. Barnabas Hinckley, there he is. Here's a portrait of Barnabas Hinckley, the physician, at his desk. So here he is in his little Shaker chair with compounds here that he's working on devising, making notes, reading his medical textbooks, and being the physician for the community, as well as overseeing the herb industry that's selling all these herbal recipes or herbal products to people far beyond the Shaker village. The Shakers were a little nervous about vanity and singling out individual members. Generally, we don't see names of individuals associated with Shaker products. Shaker furniture is very rarely signed by its makers. Shaker textiles very rarely indicated who wove them or sewed them. So to see a portrait of this man is extraordinary. It's probably the first portrait of anybody in a Shaker village ever made. And so great. We know that his coat is a different color from his trousers. There's this gorgeous blue vest, and we can see the edge paper of the golden on his book, and we can see what color that Shaker chair is. All these things are now faded and gone, and so this alone survives to tell the tale, you might say. Benson Lossing seems to have spent a lot of time in the herb house, just checking out the production. Here's a big coopered barrel full of green, fresh herbs that is going to be dumped into this large vat, and these granite stones are just going to go around. You can see there's a drive shaft here, and it's geared to turn, and they're just grinding away, pulverizing herbs. So the laboratory. Here is a Shaker brother with his distinctive long hair. They had great long hair the guys did down their back, kind of a mullet, you might say. That distinguished them. They had old-fashioned clothing and old-fashioned hairstyles. So when you walked around the village and saw people looking like that, you'd say, "Oh, I look like that. We're all on this together. This is how we are joined." And when we need to leave the village and go travel or something, people will look at us and recognize us, that we're different, because we are different. We choose to be different. We have volunteered for this life, and we're not like the world's people. So that's what we see here, is a long hair coming down the back. And so there's something boiling away here in this great vat and tapping off the liquids, and then they're in these metal cooling pans. You can tell that it's in the metal pans because here's the coopered woodenware, and it looks different from the metal here. And then it goes up into a press, and he's squeezing it down and crushing out the liquid. And I don't know if in this case if he's saving the pulp, which is that stuff we saw in the bricks being pressed down, or if it's if he's saving the liquid, or both. But here's what I mean about the woodenware. This is coopered up right there at the Shaker village by the woodworkers in the village. And here's the metal pans in which the effluent coming out of this boiler is discharged. And here he is with his press, this great crossbars crushing down and squeezing things dry over here into these buckets. So if you're making extract of butternut, great, just crush those butternuts and squash them and just make, boil them away. And I don't know what we use extract of butternut 4. I'm guessing it's not going to be on our salads. I'm guessing that there's a medicinal use for it in 1856, prepared in the United Society in a jar. Same thing with sarsaparilla. Here is the extract of sarsaparilla by David Meacham. The trustee is the one who's selling it. He's not bringing attention to himself, other than the fact that he's the contact guy. If you want, to buy more of this, if you need to communicate with someone in the village about buying and selling, go to David Meacham. So that crushing and boiling works just fine for things like sarsaparilla root. Dandelion, not so much. By the time you boil your dandelions and crush them, there's not much to see. So it was an extraordinary development to think about preparing dandelion extract, EXT extract, in a vacuum pan, which allowed it to be cooked at a much lower temperature, boiled at a much lower temperature. So in the Jerry Grant's entries in the weekly blog from the Mount Lebanon Shaker Museum, you will see a long description of the gear used at the Shaker Village to do this. So here's the crushing mill we saw earlier in the watercolor, and here's the vacuum pan, which is used to do things like, I would guess, dandelion, that is nowhere near as rugged as sarsaparilla root. So in this case, Lossing's in love with these things. A, B, C, all these little things, and at the top, here's the copper vacuum pan and the IF glasses and the thermometer and the changing pipe, and he's just spent the longest time making his notes on these watercolors. None of this stuff will make it into print. It's just for him, and as he's making his drawings, but then in his text, he will talk about how this thing works. But so this information is incorporated into a lengthy text, but here it is, just his artist's notes, rendered in great color. Did we say copper pan? There's copper color. Gail Borden loved this thing. He would come over and use it, and it was not long before he had invented a way to condense milk, and with Borden's milk, condensed milk. So there's the laboratory with the brother with the mullet haircut boiling away, and then down here is the extract house, another building up on that hillside above the main street, where the herbs are produced and finally finished off. You can see that something outside here, I think these are just piles of compost. I think these are the wrung out vegetable leaves that are going to be taken away and spread in the garden or used for the compost pile. So the laboratory in Lebanon, built in 1850, 36 feet by 100 feet. It's a big building. It must have been an enormous operation. And because it not only served the Shaker's needs in keeping them healthy and curing their ailments, but had a great reputation in the outside world. So lots of folks like us out in the big world were buying these herbs because there was no pharmaceutical industry. Folk medicine was the state of the art, and the Shakers were better at it than anybody else because they'd had more experience over a longer time. Well, here's the finishing room. What you do when you've got a couple 100 gallons of dandelion juice or butternut juice or something. And so here are sisters who are working with little vessels here, putting labels on them. I love this because you can see they've been on their feet all day, so they're standing on a carpet just to give a little bit of softness to that soft landing. This is probably the earliest view we have of a Shaker interior. I mean, other than the laboratory or the windows in the meeting house in that dance print, here is the earliest view we know of the interior of a Shaker workroom, other than the meeting house. And the color just adds so much. We know that the upholstery on the chair is a different color from the stain on the wood. This helps articulate what it is. We can see these are baskets that are in a bonnet, possibly, that are hung on the pegboard. We see there's a difference between this sister's work apron and the purple of her dress. Somebody here seems to be raised up high. This isn't a 16-inch chair height here. This one's up around, I don't know, 20 inches to get this person up so she can work on the counter better. And then back in the corner are all the bottles that the two of them are labeling. And somebody who's just sitting here, who's observing the whole thing, maybe she's letting her feet rest a bit. So here's a bottle that says extract of sarsaparilla, prepared in the United Society in New Lebanon. So this is what they're doing. They're sticking those paper labels on these bottles. Extract of wild lettuce. I don't think the wild lettuce is going to fare that well being crushed and boiled. So this is clearly going to go through the vacuum pan in order to survive the extract of wild lettuce. I'm not, who knows? Well, I'm sure somebody knows what the extract of wild lettuce is for, but it's not something I can imagine using myself. He spent some time looking at Shaker costume and the different things that you would wear in different circumstances, whether you were traveling abroad, whether you were working in the field, whether you were inside for Shaker meeting. He didn't really have great pictures of Shaker meeting, although there's a sister in the sister's costume here and the brother in the brothers worship costume. So he made these 5 figure studies here to show the different things that the Shaker brothers would wear. And then he went back, of course, because they were all his drawings, he went back and nicked a figure or two from here. So here's the sister, and here's the brother that he has used on either side here. He just recycled them. So we can see how special the blue was. Let's see. Elder on Sunday, that's why he's in blue, along with the brother that was just taken from that dance print. So as these colors faded in real life on the fabrics, this kind of drawing survives to tell us the tale of what the color of Mount Lebanon Shaker Village looked like. Likewise, with these drawings of the sisters in everyday costume. They're about the same, although one's a little bit more dressy than the other. Clearly there's a difference between what you wear in one circumstance and the other. They're both dressed up enough so that I don't think these are outdoor costumes. Nobody's going to be outside hoeing the corn looking like this, but there's a distinction. And as it turns out, when you look at the watercolor drawing, it turns out it's the same sister. But when he got back to the studio, I think he thought that they were sort of a little bit too far apart or disparate, so he turned them around so they were facing each other. But here we see that gorgeous purple dress again, and how the apron, work apron's a different color, and how in this case there's a check on the shawl, and in this case there's not. I'm not sure entirely what we know about women's Shaker costume by looking at this, other than to say that there were different costumes for different occasions. I just don't know what the occasions were. And they just colored their chairs. They did not leave the chair in a natural color. They softened the appearance of the room by adding colors to their furniture. So here's a little reminder of that. Well, okay, so in closing, just wanted to say that the prints made in 1857 and published in 1857 had a little bit of an afterlife. 20 years later, or 1875, a little less than 20 years later, Charles Nordhoff, this is the father of the mutiny on the Bounty Nordhoffs, published a book called The Communistic Societies of the United States. He had been an editor at Harper's, so all I had to do was go down to the vault, find these engravings, and reuse them. So here is 1875 Nordhoff's book, in which the Shakers were among the people that he came to enjoy and looking at, and so he's reused Lossing's meeting house picture here. And so by 1873, Joseph Becker was doing a new illustrated article for Frank Leslie's Illustrated magazine, and he needed a view of the interior of the laundry. And it's not the same picture, but you know, for my money, he was looking at this one when he drew this one. I can't prove it, but I think that he is indebted to Lossing's drawing here of 1856 when he made his own drawing or his own print here of in 1873. He published that. So, but the thing we like most about this, or that I like most about it, is just that this drawing and drawings like it survive to tell the tale. Because this room is gone, the building is gone. And sometimes buildings survive, but over the years, you know, the colors have faded and bleached out. And so what we see is a pale shadow of the original color. Or sometimes we just, you know, say those bright colors are just too boring. What we need is a good coat of kitchen white enamel on top of this. And so, you know, tastes change, ideas change, colors fade. We burn down buildings, we bulldoze them. And so this is like a little look into the past. We're now looking back to 1856 and with an extraordinary and perhaps unique view to what the colors look like in Mount Lebanon Shaker Village in 1856. That's it. Thank you very much. I wonder if there's any questions. Yes. Well, first of all, there's a reception. Do I gather the reception downstairs? I don't want to stand between you folks and the cheese, but we're okay? Okay, yes.
Was this period kind of the height of their populations and activity?
I think it was the height of their population, perhaps a decade earlier it was a lot higher. The U.S. census takers came, and in the 40s, I mean, you know, on the decade year, so in 1840 and 1850, and I think this was about the height of the population, but I think it was not the height of the prosperity, because the community was aging. And so, as it turns out, they were a little bit past their prime. They didn't know that. I mean, who knew where it was headed? But there were a number there, but there were a number of older folks, or they tended not to be, you know, 19 and young and vigorous any longer by the 1850s.
Yes. The article itself, can you just tell me how many pages long? It looks quite thorough.
Yeah, there's 18 illustrations. I'm trying to recall how many. It's probably about the same amount of pages. They're not big. I mean, they're not this size. They're this size, and he goes through and talks about Shaker's religious precepts, and he talks about the. There's quite a lot of quoting from Shaker theology, but the bulk, it seems to be this unprecedented account of meeting people and walking places and seeing things, and not just Shaker worship, which was so controversial and so exciting to write about that everybody had written about Shaker worship. This was about you know, what it looked like in the garden, what it looked like in the laboratory. So guessing it's about 18 pages of that also. Every once in a while, when you go into a used bookstore, somebody says, yeah, here's this volume of Harper's from 1857, nothing but boring pictures in it, you know, here's $5, and go for it, because it's got 18 illustrations like this in it. Yes?
I know it noted that one of the blues was robin's egg blue, but I'm wondering how long afterwards, after having been there, did he actually do these color drawings, and how do we know how accurate they are? In other words, could he have done any little exaggerations for contrast or anything like that?
Sure. You know, I mean, color memory is notoriously fugitive, so, you know, psychology today always publishes these studies about, here's a color, talk to me in 5 minutes, do you remember, is it this one or this one? And our color memory is not that great. But it looks as though he made color sketches on site. And so I doubt that he made each of these drawings right then and there. That's what the pencil sketches were for. And robin's egg blue, who knows what that meant to him compared to us. But I have a feeling that he recorded, because he was there with his watercolor kit, that he recorded the colors he was looking at, and what he saw, who knows how accurate they are. Every time you do this, you make some alteration. I showed a picture of the meeting house that had a clock in it, and by the time that appeared in print, it was just a dot on the wall. So these things do change, and I would be willing to believe that there was quite some subjectivity in them. But before the photography had come to the village, this is all we have. And he seemed to be determined to create an accurate representation. How perfect that was is anybody's guess. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I have the disadvantage of being somewhat colorblind. However, I was wondering, are these colors, the colors from this and perhaps other sources, are they being reproduced in any of the Shaker Museum buildings nowadays?
Probably. The woodcuts are ubiquitous. No one can publish a book about the Shakers without illustrating those woodcuts, or you can't walk into a Shaker exhibition in any museum without seeing one of the woodcuts, just because they're the earliest. But the color photographs, or the watercolors, I'm sorry, are they're available. All you have to do is seek them out at the Huntington Library. As I say, June Sprague published them, one in 1979, and then a couple in 1980. And then this entire article was reproduced in color in 1989. But I'm trying to think where I would have seen in a museum exhibition these watercolors reproduced, and I don't think I ever have.
My question is, the buildings themselves that survive, are they using the documentation of color in those buildings nowadays?
Not that I'm aware. I know that at Hancock Shaker Village they did an extensive paint study and started repainting the building based on chemical analysis of pigments that they found in little crevices that hadn't been scraped out or overpainted. Upon examining them, they were able to repaint things in much brighter colors. But I don't know that these watercolors have ever been used as documentation for color in village buildings. Yes?
Yeah, and one thing to add to both of the last two questions, and this is just experience, and I'm an interpreter over at Hancock. This is just experience going to some of the Shaker sites. The blues in the meeting house, just in my mind, are a little darker, a little richer blue than the blues that show up here.
No.
I know the blue in the Hancock meeting house is I would say more medium blue than a light blue. And that's probably consistent across quite a few of the meeting houses that I've gone to. And I can re-emphasize that most of the buildings they have done paint studies on, not just at Hancock, but at other places to determine sort of what the color would be.
I can tell you what they said in 1845, which was the meeting house should be painted white without and of a bluish shade within. So, you know, if you're in Maine, what is a bluish shade? You know, you're looking at blueberries, you think, oh, I know what blue is. You know, if you're at Hancock, you're looking at lavender, you think, oh, I know what blue is. So I don't know how consistent it is, but you're right, it's much darker there. Yes?
Is there any documentation about the Shaker reaction to this article and the prints that appeared at that time?
No. I have been looking for it for 25 years and have yet to hear anybody say, great pictures, or man, he was so cruel, or something. It may be that it's out there, and I just haven't taken it'll take me another 25 years to find it. But he was very generous in his descriptions of it. And it was clear that the Shakers led him around and showed him things. And his pictures are complimentary, so there's every reason to think that the Shakers, I thought it would be a good idea to invite people back in the years to come, which they did, and they really didn't like the pictures they saw in 1869 and 1870, and they said so. Should we go down and have a glass of wine? Thanks for coming, folks.
There's some wine and some water and some cheese straws